So first of all, hello everyone. Thank you for coming. I hope you've been having a good day so far. My name is Somar. This is RUM's president, and as a part of RUM's welfare and the UCL Sign Language Society, we've brought tonight's event to you, which I hope would be a very awesome lesson in how to speak to deaf patients in a clinical setting. So I'm going to hand over now to Daniel Domine, who's the president of the UCL Sign Language Society. So over to you.
So thanks very much for that introduction. So hello everybody and welcome. So hopefully this should be a really relaxed, fun session. So just a couple of things before we get started. If you want to ask any questions, do put them in the Zoom chat function. Preferably save them to the end, but if you can't remember them, in the meantime, do put them in there. No question is too stupid, and don't worry about offending me, because I think it's better that the question gets asked than if it doesn't. Yeah, so a bit about me, as you've already heard, I'm the president of UCL Sign Language Society. I'm a second year and I study natural sciences here at UCL. And I'm also deaf with a cochlear implant. So I just want to share a bit about my experiences of perhaps the various appointments I've been to and how you as medical students, as you embark, can make the experience better for deaf patients, and along the way we can learn some sign language. So a bit of an overview of what we will be discussing this evening. Okay, just before we get started, can everybody see the PowerPoint? Can somebody type yes in the chat if they can? Yes, great. So people can see the PowerPoint, great. So here's a bit of an overview. So first of all, just good to identify the common misconceptions or what people may think are common misconceptions, and then we'll take it from the broader view of disability, and then try and really think what that means in terms of relating to my own experiences of deafness, and then we'll talk a bit about how to work best with deaf people, and then we'll learn some sign language, which should hopefully be really fun, and then we will also talk about the health inequalities. So what happens when deaf people are subject to discrimination or lack of access, what happens in terms of their health. So, and then there'll be a Q&A on the end. So that's kind of the plan for this evening. Yes. So there we are. Oh, wait, go back. There we are. So there's a Kahoot quiz to start. So if you could go to this link, please, that would be great. So if you could all go to that link, that'd be great. And then we can start the quiz. Pin. There we are. I can start to see people joining. And let's just change the screen share. So now you can see the quiz. There we are. Right, so we've got 22 and there's 70 of us in here. So let's see how close we can get to 70. I'll give you 2 minutes until 11 past. Let's do it. Right, we've got 69, there's 57 of us, so let's getting there, 10 more to go. Let's just see. Right then, is it Right then, I think, has everybody had a chance to join? I think we'll get started with the quiz now. So let's get started. Okay then. So this is really to think about the misconceptions and perhaps what people think incorrectly about deafness. Just Can always be fixed. Well, I don't. Yeah, so it can be fixed, but it can be varied, because what happens, it can't always be fixed, because hearing aids and cochlear implants don't provide a total fix to the solution. We'll talk a bit more later what fixed actually means. That's a bit of a hint of what's coming later. So on to the next question. Zoom doesn't. Oh yeah. Right. So the next question. Yeah, so correctly, we've identified that it all's no. So it's very interesting, because yes, I'm talking about deafness this evening and how, but it's also a cultural minority. So you've got to think about, potentially, the cultural implications. So hard of hearing generally refers to like the audiological definition of hearing, and whereas deafness is relating more to the cultural aspects. There we are. You can see Laura's in the lead. Let's see how many people get this question correct. Is sign language universal? Okay, so we've got a bit of a more split on here. Well, I think it's interesting. It's a bit like normal languages. So you got British Sign Language, which is a type of sign language, and that is very different. It may surprise people to, for instance, like American Sign Language. So British Sign Language is, two-handed, whereas American Sign Language is just generally with one hand. And this is just, and even it varies within the country. So, for instance, British Sign Language, Southern British Sign Language will vary compared to Northern Sign Language. So it's just interesting to see that comparison, because even then, sometimes I have to correct myself if I'm signing with somebody that's familiar with Northern aspects of British Sign Language. Oh, you see, this is the most split so far. Yes, so this is a strange question. I hinted it earlier, and it's quite similar to French Sign Language and most Australian Sign Language, as we as you can see, there's lots of very different variations. It's not immediately the same. And what's interesting about sign language, it's not just signed English. It's not just Makaton, and we'll go into that more detail later. So let's see how the scoreboard has changed. We've now got Simp in the lead. Mhm. Yeah, see, so I think what's interesting to consider here is that somebody doesn't always know that they have hearing loss. Like if I think about myself in particular, there's sometimes I don't know if I've missed something because I haven't heard it in the first place, if that makes sense. So I think so with that in mind, when we're trying to be accessible and inclusive, it's you can be inclusive for everybody. It's always good to be inclusive as the default option rather than putting the burden on the person asking for it to be inclusive because they may not know themselves. So that's a very useful point to consider. Let's see how the scoreboard has changed. A is now in the lead. Yes, you were all correct on this, so well done, everybody. So what I think is interesting here is, that not everybody wants a hearing aid. It's especially because if they come from if they consider deaf as as a cultural minority, um, they don't necessarily want to, to leave that. And there is a very interesting debate especially if you were to type into, cochlear implants into Google. I put some extra links at the end of the PowerPoint which has very good articles on this debate, which we don't really have time to go into this evening, just because there's so much to cover. So, next question. Here we are. No Googling. I realised you can all Google this answer. So Googling is banned. So according to signbsl.com, how many ways there of signing the colour green? Oh, so 6. Yes. So what I think this shows us here is that there are lots of different ways of signing. It links to the fact that there are northern and different regional signs. And yes, just means there's an interesting aspect to consider. Well, we can see that Ames has now got a streak, so well done. Ames and Laura is still in the lead. So let's go. Second to last question, penultimate question. So at what age can people be deaf? So what age can people be deaf? Yeah, so the answer is all of them. And you can come deaf at any point. So I think that's an important point to consider is, sometimes people think about deafness, oh, this isn't going to affect me, but very much, it can affect you, especially in elderly. And I think it's something off the top of my head, it's a very high proportion of the population has deafness. I think it's something like 10 million or something like that. So there's a very high proportion that just links to that. So final question. Oh, we can see there's a change in the leaderboard. We got what won in the lead. So final question. Here we are. So is deaf with a capital D the same as deaf with a lowercase d? True or false? Yeah, so the answer here is false. So when you do deafness with a capital D, it refers to those people that consider themselves to be where British Sign Language is, their primary language, and generally those that, choose not to wear a cochlear implant or a hearing aid. Whereas, yeah, so hope that quiz was useful, and then now we're going to go and now we're going to view this from a the broader perspective of how this fits in with disabilities, and then we're going to zoom in into how this. Oh no, sorry, let's do the leaderboard, because I'm sure we want to find out who is the leader. So who is in the lead? So we have in first place LLG, so well done. In second place we have Alex Z, and in first place we have O. So well done, O. Well done. So this is also what we do in sign language. Instead of clapping like this, we'll shake our hands like this, just because it's a more visual way of celebrating. So well done, O. I'm sorry I don't have any prizes to give you because it's virtual. So I hope you enjoyed that quiz. So back to the presentation for this evening. So yes, so I think it's important that we set this in the context of what disability is, and the social and the medical model of disability, and how we can address these two parts. So there are common definitions that you'll come across in these, and one of them is impairment, which is the actual illness that causes the effect on the person. And then the disability is the loss of opportunities because of the kind of the social setting the person finds them in, and the environmental barriers that they find themselves in. So with those two definitions in mind, so we first have the medical model of disability, which is kind of, solving the problem, solving the person in isolation. So, for instance, one aspect of this would be giving somebody a hearing aid so they could hear. One important thing to consider with hearing aids and cochlear implant is that they don't work 100% of the time, or for all types of hearing loss. Whereas what we're going to be focusing on this evening is something called the social model of disability, which is focusing about my PowerPoint has decided to jump ahead of itself. Yes, so we've got the social model of disability, which is focusing about the environment, the negative attitudes, the barriers, and the discrimination. So this kind of deaf awareness session is trying to address this. It's interesting to consider, because for instance, if we were, as a human species, didn't communicate with speech, let's say we all signed, for instance. Let's say that was our primary form of communication. Deafness, you could argue, is no longer a disability, no longer something that needs to be addressed. And conversely, if you think about, let's say we hadn't invented the steps in the world, and then for instance, a staircase, we wouldn't have any staircases, and therefore there would, if you're in a wheelchair, it wouldn't necessarily be a disability in quite the same way. And learning to sign and communicate with people can address this with the social model of disability, because I think it's important that we attack it through these two primary approaches. We've got the medical aspect and the social aspect. Sometimes the social aspect can be the simplest option. Sometimes it's the only option. It's certainly something always to consider, rather than thinking treat. Yes, so this is just kind of a oh no, seems like the PowerPoint seems like jumping. So this is kind of thinking about the comparison. So we got the medical model, which is focusing on the individual in essence. And then we got the social model, which the barriers are the problems that are created by society, and it's addressing the barriers, and that's what we're trying to do this evening. And what I think is quite interesting to consider, especially if you're working, with patients, etc., is the patient is the expert. Even I don't want to offend people, but even people quite wrongly in the past may be considered not an expert. So particularly those with learning disabilities, absolutely they are the expert. They know how they work best. So I think as a disabled person and as a deaf person, we really do kind of appreciate you reaching out to us, because we know how to work best. We are the expert in ourselves. You may be the medical expert in the situation, but we are the expert, and we know how to make this an accessible experience for all of us. And I think it's just interesting to consider that accessibility helps us all. So yes, it's just good to be accessible by default. So for instance, a tannoy at a train station, not even people with what society would, because normal is a relative term, it's quite a dangerous term to use in this, but I'm going to use it with caution. So for instance, at a train station, if you, the normal, the person that doesn't have a disability can't even hear the tannoy, so we can make the tannoy more accessible so everybody can hear it. It will benefit the deaf person as well as everybody else. So that's kind of the idea, that accessibility is universal. So those are the first two messages. The third message I want us to take away from what I'm just discussing here is, disability is a spectrum. It's not, you got one disability, these are the things, these are the 5 things that work for me. It's it's a bit blurry. What may work for one person may not work for the other person. This is why the dialogue is so crucial, and recognizing that the person is the expert. And do reach out to us. We do appreciate that. Don't be shy. That's what I'd like to say. So hopefully that's cleared that up. Yes, so so these are just, oh, whoops, going back a second. Yes, so I think the key principles here is, yes, so we've got the whole spectrum. So what may work for one deaf person may not work for another, because of their background, because of their understanding, maybe because of the condition that you are, the type of appointment you've got, for instance. So I think it's about being open, as a person that quite often has to ask for things to change to be accessible. I find it is quite a burden, to ask, and there'll be sometimes, when I'm just fed up and I would just go, no, I can't be bothered to ask this time. So I think it's, because it can be quite a tiresome thing, always asking for things. So sometimes just casually asking, at the beginning, is there anything I can do to make it, accessible for you, and just be open and promote that conversation. Just don't be afraid, because I think, so even my experience, some people aren't very confident or know that possible adjustment that could make things a lot better is possible, because they may think the doctor is, for instance, too busy rushing around, whereas they could perfectly take the time and make it more accessible. So yeah, so linking it more closely to deaf patients, I think certainly, if, for instance, if we have an interpreter in the appointment, so interpreters, there is a lot of debate, because quite often there's lots of it. My experience is people go to appointments and then there's lots of, they don't get interpreters booked, but we are, as deaf people, are entitled to BSL interpreters, which makes us accessible also means you don't have to communicate, and there's no communication breakdown. And I think what's important is to include the deaf person. Don't just talk to the interpreter, because one of my experiences was when I was at an orthotics appointment with my parents, and my parents were interpreting, just because it was far more convenient rather than going through the laborious route. And then there was a miscommunication on the orthotics splint that I needed, and this being the NHS, the waiting times are quite long. You know, it might take a couple of months for the appointment and a couple of months for them to get made, and then they made entirely the wrong splint. It should have had a join or something like that. And then it was basically toing and throwing, because they didn't want to, you know, admit that there'd been a communication breakdown. And I think just from that small misunderstanding, that you know, it basically took a year for it to, you know, to all get sorted. And then because of that small miscommunication, then I had to end up going back to my physio and having, you know, weekly physio, because my orthotic splint wasn't correct. So yes, you may feel like you're communicating, but I think it's difficult though if you haven't got an interpreter there to, you know, to check that you are understanding correctly when you've got that kind of shallow communication. So that's just something that can happen if the communication is in place, if the barriers aren't overcome together. That's just a little story of mine. So oh no, let's go back. There we are. Great. So what I think we'll do now is we'll learn some sign language, just so we can communicate with patients better. And the first thing I would say with sign language, don't feel free to try it out. You know, especially when I'm in sign language society, a lot of people come and they are, you know, afraid of, you know, accidentally signing a rude word or something like that. Don't be afraid of that. I think we'd far more appreciate you trying it a little bit rather than not at all. So let's start with the alphabet. So I'm going to move back so you can hopefully all see me. So that's my frame. There we are. So I am right-handed, so I will be pointing at this hand here. If you are left-handed, you need to point to this hand here, etc. Do like this, whereas I'll be doing it like this. Yes. So let's start with the vowels. So in the end, we'll be able to learn on how to sign our name. So we have the vowels. So we have a plate. This is your hand here. You don't want to point it to the screen like this. You just want to point it towards yourself. And then we have A, like that. E, I, O, U. So our vowels are A, E, I, A, E, I, O, U. So it's A, E, I, O, U, like that. And if you're left-handed, it would be A, E, I, O, U, like that. So that's our vowels. And then we've got A. So we've got A, and then B is bringing two little like O's together like that. So B, and then C is like this. So if you're right-handed, with your right hand like this. So C is like that. It's just with one finger. It's not with multiple fingers. It's just with one finger. So we've got A, C. And then D is, you bring this pointy fingers, which you use a lot, and then you bring them together like that. So that's D. And then E we've already done. So we all know that. Please do tell me if I'm going too fast or if you want anything repeated, just because I can't see any of you at the moment. E. F is you bring two little double fingers like that and you pop them together. That's F. There we are. Great. I'm going at the right pace. That's good to know. It's always good to go. So G is you make two little fists like that, and then you pop them on top of each other. G. And then we've got H. And then we got I, which we already know. And then let's go from the beginning. So we got A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I. Then J is the same finger that I is on, and you just literally stroke it down and you make a J. And then we got K, which is bringing back your pointy finger and make a hook with this finger like this. So it's nice and pointy, and you want to bring this knuckle together here onto this finger like that. So we got K, L, so you're using your plate again, and we got an L here, so that'd be an L like that, so towards yourself. So L. N is with like 3 fingers, just because that looks like an M like that, and you pop them together on your plate like that, so that's towards, so like an M like that. That's M. And then N is with 2 fingers, so like that, pop them together like that. So let's go from the beginning again. So we got A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N. So we've done up to N, okay? And then O, we already know, because that's this finger here on the plate for our vowels. O. Then P, we bring our pointy finger back. We make a little like the, so it looks like a P. So we got P. Q is you make like this. That's Q. Yeah. Q is like that. And then we've got R, which is our plate, and making the same hook that we did for K and bringing them together like R. And then S, you're going to bring, so you've got 2 little pinky hands, and then you bring them together like that. So that is S. And then T is you've got your plate again, you've got a pointy finger, and then you pop them together like that to make T. And then U, we already know, because that is U. So we got A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, like that, and T, U, V. So V is our plate again, and with like a little V shape, just pop them on like that. W's, you get 4, your fingers out like this, and then you just cross them together to make W. And then X is 2 little pointy fingers, and then you make an X. And then a Y is it's almost like that. I think that's the best way to describe it. So we've got Y, and then we've got Z, so finish, which is 2 little palms, you pop them together like there, like a right angle. So there is Z. So let's go from the beginning again, and then that'll be our final run through of the alphabet. Let's go backwards, actually. That will help us remember it more, I would say. So let's go backwards. We've got Z, Y, X, W, V, U, T, S, R, R, Q, P, so P is like, yeah, P is like that, O N M L K J I H G F E D C B and A. So if we want to introduce ourselves, just because you might want to, you just make it a bit nice, friendly and relaxed. You go name, which is your N from your head. So you go name, voice off. So me with no lip patterns, just point to yourself and then finger spell your name. So for me, it'd be name. So that's Daniel. So do people want to turn off their cameras and demonstrate? Hopefully this won't descend into chaos. So do people want to turn off their cameras and demonstrate? That'd be great. So yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that one. Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. Yeah, like that. There we are. Other way around. Flip the hook round. There we are. Great. Way. Yeah. Great.
Awesome. Thanks a lot for that.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to finger spell their names and introduce themselves?
Wait, I'll try.
Yay,
so,
Harry.
So, wait, can you see me or is the background? I'm going to turn my
Background is awesome, but yeah, we see that background.
Is that the only thing you see?
Oh, no, we see you. It's fine. No worries.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, so A, R, yeah, great. I, G, H, N, I. Yeah, well, thank you very much for that. Yeah, let's have one more person demonstrate. So who wants to do that? Great, say something. Somebody's turned on their camera. Jasmine. Okay. Does somebody else want to demonstrate? Don't be shy. Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry. You won't be able to see my mouth. Hello. I'm Johnny.
Yeah. Hey. Well. Hey. Thank you very much for that. Great. So yes. So that is how we finger spell the alphabet. So so in terms of finger spelling, it can be used to finger spell any word you don't know. So for instance, you could finger spell aorta, for instance. It'd be A-O-R-T-A. That'd be aorta. You know, for instance, if you didn't know the sign for aorta. So here is some basic signs. So for instance, we have got doctor. So doctor is almost like on your wrist, doctor, but you do it towards yourself like that. So doctor. Nurse is with your shoulder. You don't turn to be straight down like that, and then across like that. So that's nurse like this. So we got nurse. We got how are you? Pain. And also sign language is a very expressive language. So it'll be pain with making yourself look like you are in pain essentially. And then we got, so how are you is more up to here, whereas healthy is just, you know, straight down here and just healthy, so healthy. And then we have ill, which is, if you can see me, it's just two little fingers like that. So we got ill, like that. And then we also have good, bad, like this. So the same as ill, but just straight down. If you can see that, yes. So we got ill, bad, and then we got, for instance, we got tired, sick. So we sick. There are lots more. I mean, I am just scratching the surface. So, but do try any of these little words, even just, how are you, just to, just make a patient feel more at ease, especially if they sign. So for instance, how are you? Then yes. So that's kind of a little whistle-stop tour. We've only barely scratched the surface. So if you do want to learn more, we do weekly classes at 6 p.m. on a Wednesday. It's the same link. So to find the join link, just look at our Facebook social media, and you're more than welcome to join, even though we're a couple of weeks in, because the finger spelling, and that's the main thing you need to be able to participate into our lessons. So do come to our classes and learn a bit more. So let's just talk about the health inequalities in the D-deaf community. So hence we've got these D/D, because we've discussed that before. The capital D is in the cultural minority, whereas D is like the audiological definition of deafness. One thing I think is very important to consider is that people, especially in the capital big D, D-deaf as you call it, British Sign Language is not the same as spoken English. So quite often they'll have quite a poor, even reading of spoken or written English. I think I found a study, and it was an average of a 9-year-old. So this kind of can lead to lots of information deprivation, which various studies have shown they're far more likely to be in worse health just because they don't have access to this information. I think that's a common misconception, is that people can find for that's writing down information doesn't make it accessible for all deaf people, because they will communicate in British Sign Language, which has its own syntax. It's not just signed English. So I think that's the main give. And I think it was interesting because there was quite a lot of debate about the COVID government daily news conference briefings, which is obviously a public health issue. So I thought I would bring it up here. So there's quite a lot of anger really from the deaf community, because there wasn't an interpreter being provided at the England briefings, which means that deaf people couldn't access that, even with subtitles. Some people prefer it to be in the British Sign Language syntax, because that's all they are. That's what they are most proficient in. So even subtitles isn't sufficient, and but there are various charities that would be great, that have lots of extra resources and lots of extra signs, and one of them is called Sign Health. So I think I want to leave some space to questions, because we've only got 10 minutes left. So yes, so if you do want to, So if you do want to know more sign language, there are weekly beginner classes at Wednesdays at 6 p.m. via Zoom. All our activities are via Zoom. And then we also do deep dives, generally on a Monday at 6 p.m, often once a month. And that's really just to dive into different aspects of deaf culture. So we've had our most recent one was looking at the discrimination, the double discrimination you might receive if you're deaf and LGBT and LGBT plus, and trying to fit into different communities. So they're just really thought-provoking discussions, and it's just a great way to meet new people and also practice your sign language. With we have various deaf people also involved in our society, so you get to meet them as well. So that's just if you feel intrigued and you want to do it more. I don't want to limit you at this because this is only an hour this evening. No, let's go back. Yes, so there are a couple of interesting resources this evening. So I've given you the link of Sign Health, which is a charity that tries to promote health literacy amongst deaf people. So if you want to explore them, and you know there's lots of interesting information. There's a very useful study published. It gives you a very good background into what happens when people, are denied interpreter access and aren't accessible and can't communicate with their doctors effectively at an appointment. Sorry, yeah. So there's that link to that. And then just very interestingly, the cochlear implant controversy. There's, if you Google cochlear implant, even the cochlear implant switch-ons, and you go into YouTube and you look at the comments, it'll be filled with comments from quite heated from different sides. So that's a very good introduction if you want to look at that, because that's obviously a medical intervention. I think it's always very interesting to consider the cultural context of what you're doing the medical intervention in. So that I think concludes it. So it's at 6:52. I've got my email there if you want to email me any questions or anything like, or if you think of anything. So if you have any questions, do put them in the Zoom chat box. I think that would be the best way to do it. And don't be afraid of asking any stupid questions. I'm very happy to answer any more questions. So let's have some questions now. Okay, we have our first question. What do we do at Sign Language Society? So at Sign Language Society, I think there are 3 things that we try and do, or 2 things. So number 1 is we teach people, we spread knowledge about about sign language. So we try and immerse people into. So we have weekly lessons at 6 p.m. with loads of breakout rooms. There'll be lots of practice opportunities. And then number 2, we do the deep dive series, which is this focusing and going deeper into one aspect of deaf culture. So for instance, I think we've got another one planned at 6 p.m. In December, focusing on deaf history, just to really understand that. And so those are the main things. And then number 3, we just generally promote being inclusive and being accessible, because I think that's just a great message that we can all take. Just doing that by default, it just helps everybody and makes a stronger community. So yes, we've got some of you on deep dives. Next question: how do you deal with mask wearing when communicating with deaf patients, as lip reading is really important? Okay then, so yes, I mean, this is important because I think I haven't been to the doctors during COVID when masks were wearing was a lot more, but if I think about when I went to the dentist, and dentists obviously wear masks, and it was obviously very claustrophobic because number 1, you're lying back on your head, they got their mask on, so you can't even hear what they are saying, and then they are doing things, you're putting things in your mouth and you can't even see them putting things in your mouth. So it's like, it's a double thing. It's just really disorientating. So I think the key things is, if you can, before doing the procedure or before getting close to the patient is, to take off your mask and, stay socially distanced if that is allowed. So I hope that answers your question. Do let me know if you have any other questions. Okay, next question. In order to join the sign language classes, do I have to get the paid membership or is the remote membership enough? Yeah, so very good point. You only need a remote membership. So classes are free, so you can just come along and give a trial. Okay, next question. Sorry if you've already covered this, but what have your experiences with medical professionals been like? Have they been particularly good? What has made them so? So I think the ones that have taken more time that have been good is ones that have actually, positively acknowledged that I have a disability. It's like haven't just ignored it and made it really awkward and just taken the time just to do that. So I think that's what makes them really good. And just to speak to me just as a normal person, not because sometimes I find that sometimes people don't assume that I'm capable of receiving the information as a non-disabled person. So just talk to me normally and just let me be the expert, let me guide you. I'm here to help you, you're here to help me. It's a two-way process. So I think that's what makes it a very good, effective relationship. Okay then, next question. Yes, I think I've already kind of addressed this, but I think so what is the number one piece of advice you have for medical students when interacting with a deaf patient in the community or in a clinical setting? I think it's number one, finding out what do they need and, being very open to what they need. So if they need an interpreter, do book an interpreter, just so you get the effective communication. Obviously, that may not be their need. And just and also if they do sign, just introduce yourself with a bit of sign language, just how are you or something like that, and sign your name. Just makes everyone feel more relaxed, because I think I always greatly appreciate it if somebody does sign to me, because I find that's an easier way to communicate, even though I can communicate through speech. So but everyone's different, but we all do appreciate that. Okay then, next question. In terms of the sign language classes, do you focus on the different topic areas each time? Yes, we focus on a different topic area each time. So, for instance, the first week we did, so we've done animals and stuff like that. We've done numbers one week. We did finger spelling one week. Yeah, so it's a different topic each week. And also, if you miss a lesson, we upload a video of all the key signs from that lesson to our YouTube channel, which you can all check out. I think we'll make sure a link gets pushed out to you to the YouTube channel. Okay. Next question, when do people usually get cochlear implants if they decide to get it, and what is the transition usually like? Okay, so I can probably answer this question from my own experiences. So in terms of a cochlear implant, it only treats certain or addresses certain hearing losses. So if you want to be specific, it will only affect sensorineural hearing loss of the cochlea, which is part of the inner area where the hair cells are damaged, and it will just artificially stimulates the nerve endings in the cochlea in the ear. And so the transition is usually, so what the transition is like is not an instant change. It doesn't happen overnight, because your brain has to get used to recoding the new signals, etc. And that's also one of the debates is, if somebody's been deaf for 20 years, should they get a cochlear implant just because their brain hasn't had the experience of processing the auditory input. And bizarrely also, I don't know, because I only really remember hearing with cochlear implants, because I had my first one when I was 3 and the second one when I was 7. that we hear music differently. So I've never really been a fan of music. So it's always intrigued me what music sounds like to all of you guys. Okay. Yes. Okay. So what do music and voices sound like without a cochlear implant? So without a cochlear implant, I can't hear anything. I am totally profoundly deaf. So one of the ways that my parents knew that there was perhaps something going on was they took me to an air show, and there was a jumbo jet flying over, and I didn't even turn my head to a jumbo jet. So yes, so cochlear implants are generally for people with a profound hearing loss. So I can't hear music without it, or voices without it. I do take these out at night, and at night I can't hear anything at all. So yes. Okay, we got one more question. Okay, from Crystal. So we have, are there any more behaviours, languages, or phrases that hearing people may use that come off as offensive to the deaf community? I think it's just the obvious ones, like for instance, deaf and dumb. Quite often there's jokes about if you're deaf, you have your deaf face and you look dumb, and and I think it's also perhaps not taking advantage of the fact that you can speak and we can't hear you speaking. So that's probably one of the main things. But I think it's just common sense. And to be honest, I think as a deaf community, it doesn't matter if you get it wrong. We'll just happily correct you. So it's okay. Odd question. But how do you know if people are knocking on your door, ringing the doorbell? So outside my university room, just because when I go to bed, or sometimes I take my implants out, just because it gives me nice respite, I have a flashing doorbell, so that flashes. So that's an answer to your question. Some people also have hearing dogs that will alert them. They'll be trained to respond to those kind of signals. I hope I've answered everybody's questions. If I've missed you, please do re-put your question. Is that all the questions, or do we have any more? I think that's all the questions then.
Lovely. If there are no more questions then I'd like to take the opportunity to say thank you so much, Daniel, for all the time you've taken this evening to talk to us. It was definitely a very eye-opening. I definitely had a few misconceptions which have been a bit dispelled tonight. It's all been really, really lovely, honestly. Thanks for everything, and the teaching and the Kahoot. That was really fun as well. Thanks so much.
So thank you very much for that. So I hope everybody has a good rest of the week, and all the best. And yeah, so thank you very much for all the good feedback. So goodbye, and hope you found this useful, and do ask any other questions.